One of the strongest builds that's taking over China ladder lately is Riven Reroll. Riven is an 8-bit edgelord that really benefits as the inverse of Xunge. She wants to confront the action and shield herself and get to the carry as fast as possible to assassinate them. The 3 reasons why Riven is really strong right now is 1, she's relatively uncontested. She only cares about her being 3-star, and everything else doesn't really matter nearly as much. The core units you want to play around are Riven, Viego, Yone, Kale, Mordekaiser, and Garen. And then from there, you tech in whatever 8-bit you can get like Corki and Caitlyn. You're gonna reroll for 3-star Riven only on level 7 and have these 7 units in. Reason number 2, you actually don't care about what headliner you get, whether 8-bit or the edgelord. And reason number 3, you get to play around components that nobody else wants. Riven's best in slot items are 3 cloaks: Bloodthirster, Titans, and Quicksilver. This means almost no matter what happens, you can't get screwed on things like Carousel because people don't want this cloak item outside for like maybe one Even Shroud or Spark. So all these factors combined are actually allowing Riven to thrive as being an off-meta composition. In this episode of In Too Deep, we hop on board with world champion Xunge from China, who shows us just how strong this composition is. If you don't believe me, take a look for yourself. Xunge is currently around 1800 to 1900 LP and has been climbing a lot with reroll as one of his main primary strategies. In general, Xunge is a world champion. He won the Set 7 Dragonlance World Championship and has played a lot of 3-cost reroll in particular. That seems to be one of his areas of specialty, where he is really good at 1, understanding like how to best optimize the comp, and 2, really efficient with how he's actually able to get there. He's usually able to do it much quicker and cleaner than a lot of other players. He's also a player that's willing to deviate a little bit and improvise. That's not to say that he's just a reroll 1-trick guy. I've said 50% of his games. The other half of his game, he's still playing, you know, the usual 4-cost flex. So in this shop, immediately we have a headliner Yasuo and we buy a second Yasuo. The first thing you always think about when you're kind of setting up these early games is this going to be something that I want to reroll immediately? He looks at Yasuo, and if he gets the right items, maybe, but I do believe that Yasuo was the true damage variant because 6 true damage is what's really strong right now. You probably have heard already, 6 true damage is pretty OP. Starts off with another glove and a bow, so he has the opportunity to lean into it if he wants to, but we'll see. Go ahead and pause on his augments and check in on what Xunge has available to him. Twin Terror is an augment that actually benefits a lot from his item setup. Twin Terror is really good with executioners, and this is because Twin Terror gives you not just the combat stats of health and attack speed, but also crit chance. So it's kind of like making the executioners get a little bit more bonus damage, and so it's particularly good on them. If you want to go for executioners, the build would probably be around Samira, Vex, and Twitch as the executioners. You don't really play around cards in Akali because they're too expensive to try to get 4 copies or more, ideally 6. So I don't really think this is like the spot to go for a Twin Terror, but if he does end up going for it, that's a really interesting commitment line, which I'm not exactly sure would pay off. Cybernetic Uplink is something that is better later in the game because when you get all those items spread out and you're able to maximize the mana gain that you're able to get from, you know, collectively boosting your entire team, that's when Uplink usually hits its stride. In the early game, you're looking more for things like Cybernetic Bolt that just gives you straight HP, so that way you can fight with a little bit more health than your opponent, because flat stats are much more impactful early game than they are late game. That being said, 120 HP is 120 HP, so it's still better than not having any combat augment in some scenarios where you have to pay off much later, and so he could theoretically take that if he wanted to streak. This third augment, what doesn't kill you, is considered to be one of the strongest lose streak augment. Every 4 losses, you get additional component, and every loss gives you 2 goals. So you're trying to lose streak, and the way that it's timed interval wise is if you lose 8, it's going to line up very cleanly to after the stage 3 carousel, because those are 8 combats, 5 in stage 2 and 3 at the beginning of stage 3. So usually you aim for like a 3-5 roll down and try to go for a powerful level 7, or if you're able to somehow get your economy up, you can even go for a fast 8 at 3-5, which is pretty bananas but very doable. I'm okay with rerolling the first 2 options here. I do think that what doesn't kill you is a really good backup option because it's one of the most powerful ways you can play the game currently. So he actually chooses to reroll, and now we have 2 healthy, Gifts of the Fallen, and you have my sword. 2 healthy is actually a very tricky augment to play around because the 2 costs in this current set tend to fall off really hard late game, just like 1 cost. But if you're able to build around them cleverly, around some of their traits, you get some really nice things in the late game. So for example, you can play Spellweavers with Seraphine and Gragas, and you can tie that into like an AP composition. But in general, I don't think that he's in a spot where he wants to commit to a 2 healthy reroll, so it doesn't seem very good. And then Gifts of the Fallen is okay, but remember, these scaling augments that benefit from having a lot of units aren't really strong early. early. So Gifts of the Fallen is much better at the end of the game because you have 7, 8, 9 units that die, and therefore you have 3, 6, 9% of whatever stacking from Gifts of the Fallen. Early game, it barely gives you anything. So very weak early. So that being said, I think that You Have My Sword is probably the only logical pick, and that's what he ends up going for as well. So here we have 2 swords, a glove, and a bow. Commits to an Infinity Edge. He's scouting on it a lot right now, even looking more than on his own board, because he's trying to see where he should be positioning, and also more specifically, what his opponent is trying to play. When you're playing reroll, the most important thing this set is to not be contested. It's even more important than having perfect items or even the perfect augments. It's to not be contested because the bag size changes. If you haven't heard already and you've been living under a rock, the amount of maximum copies of a champion in the entire set has been reduced. So therefore, if you're contested on, say, a 3 cost with only 17 in the pool currently as of this patch, if someone has a 3-star, that means it's literally impossible for you to hit it. And there's also an additional rule, which is if less than half are remain in the pool, you can't even see the headliner. So if you're in a situation where you have like 6 Yones or 6 Samiras and someone else has, 4 Samiras or Yones, you can't even see the headliner and get that instant 3-star. And this is intentional because Riot wanted to stop the number of 3-stars from getting out of control, but it's been a contentious issue. All of that to say is basically don't be contested if you possibly can. Speaking of also things that you shouldn't be doing right now, the win-loss here for Xunge is quite brutal. He went up against a 3-item Lilia with Mogul's Mail and Crown Guard, ended up getting stopped there. And so now he's in a spot where he wants to focus on making gold, but it's kind of actually tricky because let's say he wins the fight. Now he's gone win, loss, win, and now his streak is inconsistent and he's going to be a lot poorer than usual. He's scouting around and he sees a lot of players are actually trying to lose. He's going up against someone who also has What Doesn't Kill You. This is an important thing to note, by the way. He saw that someone else has What Doesn't Kill You. It makes it less likely that he's able to lose streak because those kinds of players tend to want to sell everything and guarantee that they're able to go for a 5 loss on stage 2. So this is pretty rough. This is actually not a great spot for him at the moment. All right, so we're going to grab this vest, and this vest gives us opportunity to make a Titan's Resolve or a Edge of Night. Edge of Night is something that might be better in certain matchups, like against Ahri, for example. Ahri locks onto a carry and then she doesn't let go, and those melee carries can't get out of range, and so it drops that aggression, which could be really useful. Titan's Resolve is a little bit more flexible, but it kind of keeps you locked into that melee carry range. And so he grabbed the vest and he wanted to slam an item right here, but the downside is now he kind of has to play a melee carry of some sort, and his options are going to be either Zed, Riven, Yone, or Viego. You can obviously put this onto really powerful melee carries like, perhaps a Kiana in the late game, but for now we're not going to be able to get to that point. Now our worst fears have been realized, which is now we lost again. So we went win, lose, win, lose. And that is actually a really bad thing because our economy is all in shambles now. You're not getting the streak gold. You just made 10, you leveled, and now we're in a really tough spot. And so in these situations, when you're win, loss, win, you have to focus on prioritizing your economy in the current state of the game. So in this case, he takes out the jacks. It does make his board weaker, and he's going to try to have the ability to guarantee and sell to 20. And that's because the earlier you make 20, the earlier making 30, and so on and so forth. And you don't want to be stuck behind while holding all these like 1 or 2 off champions. So you don't want to hold his jacks, you don't want to hold his MF, you don't want to hold his Pantheon. And yes, theoretically, you could make up a bunch of scenarios where connecting these to potential future shots could be huge. But if you're not making that 20 gold, you won't even have the opportunity to 2-star and upgrade your board, and you're just going to fall further behind. So in these spots, a lot of times people ask, what are you supposed to do when you're kind of like low rolling? Because this is actually the worst of everything. You'd actually rather be the person at 65 who lost everything, or the people who are healthier, like 92, that probably had the same streak, but was able to have like 10 to 15 more HP. In these kinds of spots, I highly recommend that you try to come up with a game plan fast. Essentially, when you're stuck in these kinds of spots, less resources means fewer options. So you don't get the ability to be like, well, I want to level up to 8 and have the ability to play around any 4 costs I want, right? Is it going to be like Zed, or is it Viego? Is it going to be all these different things? A lot of times you have to kind of make up your mind because you don't really get a big window of opportunity to have margin for error. The people who are 100 HP and 94 HP streaking, they're going to have a lot more gold and a lot more HP than you are. So they have time to be able to kind of do whatever they want. In this case, you have to go for something decisive and you have to go for something quick. I think Xunge should roll down here at 6 and try to figure out what his game plan is, and more specifically, find a good holder of these items. In this situation, it's very clear that he's trying to hold items on a Corki 1. His opponent had just hit an MF2. We're at 70 HP. We're quite poor. We got to make something happen. And if you actually kind of look at this specific layout of the rest of the stage here, if he loses 4 more times and he's not going to roll and upgrade his board, he's losing by average 4 to 5 champions, he's going to be like at like 40 to 35 HP by the end of stage 3, which is not going to be acceptable at all. So to summarize, when you're low rolling, 1, narrow down your options based off what's available to you, and 2, commit very hard and aggressively. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and look at this augment selection screen and see what actually feeds into that game game plan. Hologram is very open-ended. That doesn't help us in terms of what we're able to do until we get a 3-star copy of a really powerful champion that we may be duplicating, or maybe like some late game 5-cost headliner that we're able to get 2 of that's really, really impactful. That's really not on the table for me right now because hologram is just too open-ended. We don't even know what our headliner is. Pandora's items is pretty committal because theoretically we could get like the best possible items that we want for a carry. In this case, we're going to play a melee carry around Titans and Infinity Edge. The problem is Pandora's items doesn't give us time. We kind of have to stabilize now or at least get our game plan rolling, and Pandora's items could theoretically take a very long time, and we just lost out an entire stage and a half of being able to use the Pandora's items turn after turn to roll for those optimal items. New recruit, however, is immediate impact now, and it gives us a duplicator to potentially find a way to spike. And this also gives an opportunity to play for a level 8 as well if we don't want to reroll. It is Xunge, so I do think he wants to tend to reroll. It is something that he does very often. We might even take new recruit and use it to reroll something as well. Okay, so he's choosing to reroll his first 2 options. Binary airdrop is really interesting. It's actually an augment that could theoretically work right now because he does have 2 items on his Corki, for example. And if he ends up selling that Corki and rolling for a headliner, he can play for a little bit more items. Lightning speed is okay. It gives you 2 items right now. The only thing is it doesn't really feed into any game plan of ours because, as I talked about, like, you know, you want to like narrow down your possible carries and what kind of build you want to play and what kind of comps you have in your mind. And blinding speed actually opens it up because now you have 4 items that you can kind of spread around. Like, do you want to go red buff, i.e. Ezreal, and then try to go for like Rage Blade on someone else? And then, you know, you have a Titans on a frontliner. It doesn't really necessarily like lean into a specific composition that gives us a lot of that strong direction. So binary airdrop is worth considering. I do think new recruit is probably the strongest. The only thing is that he has to make his decision somewhat quickly because he only has like 20 seconds to roll. And if he's not going to actually commit to a roll, he's going to bleed a lot more HP. Oh my gosh, he's actually running out of time. And now at this point, he has to kind of choose something. Okay. So he actually does something quite different than I thought that he was going to do entirely, which is he chooses to get this new recruit. So first of all, if he took binary, he wouldn't even get value because he had 3 items on this Corki. I forgot about that sword. He doesn't even buy this Pantheon as a guardian either. This is a really interesting play. Like, I actually didn't think he was going to do this at all. I was telling you about like how you handle low rolls from like narrowing down your game plan, but committing to it as hard as you can and trying to stabilize. But now this looks like to me like he wants to actually do a slow 6 because he was too poor to level 6 and he wanted to guarantee the lose streak. And I think he wants to go at level 7 at 3-5 instead of 4-1. This is a more aggressive play than I was even talking about, which is now I've been rolling at 6 to try to stabilize and streak on stage 3, but to give up and effectively just lose the next 2 rounds, bleed more HP, and then try to go for a 3-5. If he tries to bleed 2 more rounds into a 4-1, that might be too much, but we'll go ahead and see. This is Xunge, who's a player who's quite notable for kind of pushing the limits in terms of the rerolls. Right? A lot of these CN players at the very top are willing to incur some really big risk. So now he's going to go for a cloak and get for that Bloodthirster, i.e. Bloodthirster and Titans. So now he has full damage, not much defensiveness, no like Edge of Night, no Quicksilver. And so he's going to try to go for kind of this big glass cannon melee carry that hopefully can carry him back out of this deficit. So he's going to hope that leveling the 3-5 and getting to 7, he's able to stabilize and hard spike right here, right now. Okay, so we're rolling. Finds an Edgelord Yone headliner, which is great. That's exactly what he's looking for. And this could be an opportunity to set up Yone. Right now he has 4 Edgelords, so he's trying to figure out his best possible board. And he's also teching in Heartsteel because he knows that by spending so much of his resources right now, he's going to be poorer than usual. The biggest downside of these aggressive plays is you're going to be a lot poorer than the rest of the lobby for the majority of the game. At this point, we're already kind of poor early. And because we all in even quicker than I was anticipating, I was thinking that we roll some at 3-2, try to build a really strong board, and then streak the rest of stage 3. He decided to actually just almost all in here at 3-5, but he actually sold up to 20 gold. And now he has an opportunity to eco back up and try to go for this Yone 3 or maybe back out into something else. It is somewhat feasible that for him to even push to level 8, sell this Yone, and play around 4 costs. The thing about these orange duplicators is you always feel really bad using them for low cost units. So I like the inclusion of the Heartsteel, and now because other people are level 7 but trying to gear up for level 8 roll down, he still gets these very easy wins, and this Yone 2 does stabilize him temporarily. And so now another question comes, which is, does he roll again? And if so, how deep is he going to roll until he feels like he's stable? Because, okay, sure, we stopped the bleeding, we're at 40 HP, and we kind of have a direction of like playing around these edgelords. How do we best get them in? Not to mention, he still needs to hit like Viego and Mordekaiser and get the pentakill in. A lot of times with these melee comps, you really want to play pentakill because pentakill gives you that team team-wide attack speed, which really amplifies all these giant 80 stats coming your way. Get another sword, cloak, and rod. So we got a even shroud, which is actually really huge for him to get armor reduction. Puts it onto his Cassante too, and he's not going to roll. I think that even shroud is a pretty big spike. Scouting around and seeing if he wants Xunge to be on the left or right. In general, Xunge is a scaling champion, so you want to give him safety in the beginning of the fight because when he's casting, he's racking up that omnivamp and that move speed. So you want him to be away from all that danger. Also, you don't want him to get stuck on a super tank as well. So this ends up being a really nice fight for him where it doesn't look like he's really threatened and his opponent is at level 8, but seems to hit the Blitzcrank with a True Damage Emblem. And so this is not going to be that bad of a loss unless this Yone is able to scale up. Oh my god, this Yone is just too strong. This is part of the reason why Yone is really, really good. By keeping that Yone safe, he's now able to guarantee that victory because he just scaled too much and has too much Omnivamp. All right, let's look at the 4-2 augments. Oh my god, he has Recombobb, and he does have a 2-cost 3-star. It's too bad because Recombobb is often like what you can do if you play it one turn earlier. So for people who level up at 4-1 and roll for a 4-cost headliner, usually Recombobb is what you pick to get a 4-2 legendary as a 2-star, like, you know, get that early 2-star Kiana, for example. But that is an option at his disposal. It's a little bit too gambly for me, but hey, I mean, maybe he ends up picking it. Unify Resistance is actually okay to pick here as well because everything's kind of lined up as melee carries in one giant row, so probably fine to pick here. Indomitable Will is also interesting because it has the highest ceiling out of everybody else. Indomitable Will says that when your team scores a takedown, your entire team gets immunity for 10 seconds from crowd control, and that's actually huge because we don't have that on our melee carry through Quicksilver or Edge of Night or anything else. This is also an augment that's best towards the end of the game because you're much more likely to kill units and get online quickly, and it's much more effective against those wide AoE big casts from, you know, the Threshes and the Echoes that's trying to stun your front line. So I really like Indomitable Will here out of all the three of them, but I'm also willing to roll for the first two and see what ends up being picked here. He sees Iron Grab Bag and Teaming Up, but those aren't strong enough. Okay, so he picks the Indomitable Will, skips Item Grab Bag and the Teaming Up. He sells the Yone. A lot of people thought maybe we'd be rolling for Yone 3, but in this case, we're rolling it really hard down. We hit Viego 2, and it looks like he's hunting for Riven specifically. Like he wants Riven or Bust, and he misses. Takes out the Olaf because it's not that useful as a pentakill unit, and he needs to get another edgelord if he possibly can, which is the Yone. Plays the Caitlyn. Got a little dizzy there, which I totally understand. But how bad is this? Oh god, his chat is actually even saying that he's dead. They just... are you just dead? Okay, well, this is not looking too good here for Xunge. So he did end up winning this fight, but at the same time, does he have to sell this Kale again and roll once more? He does have 3 Riven. So if he's rolling specifically for Riven or for Crowd Diver Yone, he can't be rolling for Crowd Diver Yone because he itemizes Riven and he's holding all the edgelords and Garen as well. Takes out the Heartsteel and now is playing around the Caitlyn 2 with no headliner. Bloodthirster and Even Shroud onto the Viego 2. This is because you should put Even Shroud onto your tankiest unit. And guess what? Viego 2 is the tankiest, especially if you give him Bloodthirster. Downside, this Viego is separating very often from the Riven. So you're not going to actually be able to consistently get that Even Shroud armor reduction onto Riven because they're both edgelords moving away versus having it on like one stable frontline unit like a Mordekaiser is less likely for that to happen. But this goes back to what we were talking about, which is you got to play aggressive when you're playing from behind. And look at what happened. Because he played really aggressive and he did end up getting 1 or 2 lucky things, which is hitting Viego and a Caitlyn 2, he's able to actually capitalize on these boards that aren't actually online yet. A lot of people are just kind of like rolling and transitioning in the end of stage 3, beginning of stage 4, and he's just trying to take advantage of the fact that people are a little bit weaker and not hitting. So by being aggressive, he has that streak. Riven has finally appeared in the shop, by the way. So now we have our 5 edgelords in, and we have 3 8-bit, and my god, I wish we had an item remover because we can put all this on Riven and get everything in. But for now, he recognizes that he needs that 5 edgelord bonus, and playing a Riven 2 is still stronger than just, you know, teching in like Corki 1 to try to get the 4 8-bit here. Not to mention that he would also lose the edgelord. And this Riven is actually just slicing and dicing through everything and really capitalizing on the fact that most people are not prepared to deal with the Riven with Indomitable Will, so you can't stun her, and he's ambushing and blitzkrieging one side. Another thing to pay attention to about positioning is he has the Caitlyn behind the Riven and the Viego. So he has all of his strongest offense on one side to push through one corner, then infiltrate the back line. And remember, remember, edgelords have the ability to flip and dash through the champions as part of their traits. So now he actually wants these Rivens to have the inverse of what Yone is. Yone wanted to be far away because he wants to scale. He wants to be safe until he gets to this point where he's unkillable. Riven wants to actually blitzkrieg to the other side and ambush the carries in the corner and take them out. So we're actually on the wrong side against this Twisted Fate, but that ended up being okay. And another really unsung hero is New Recruit, because it's giving us that extra team slot. So that way we're able to get in a little bit more synergies and kind of have a nice, more balanced composition here. So he's not actually saving up his gold. And look what happened here. We're at 4-7. We're broke as hell, but we are streaking. And now all of a sudden we're one Riven off from getting Riven 3. So we're going to send here and see if we can hit Riven 3. He has 8 Rivens, but he's not actually using his duplicator yet. Okay. I guess he wanted to see if there's a possibility of him getting that Riven without actually using that duplicator. But at this point, we pretty much have everything that we want set in stone. All right. So let's pause here and talk about itemization. The past couple of sets now, the most important things to consider is burn and shred. Shred to reduce the resistances of either armor or magic resistance, or burn through anti-heal. So that way you don't get, melee carries to, infinitely heal against you, or your opponents that have gunblade to just constantly heal that front line over and over. And so in this case, we have the shred through the even shroud, but we don't have anti-heal. So something with this belt is probably going to be a anti-heal option. So you have to mentally lock in that belt is committed to something else and work from there. So if we slam something like a Morello Nomicon, which is a little bit awkward because we're a physical damage comp and Morello's mainly for AP, and we're left with a bow, a vest, and a glove. It just gives us the ability to try to pick up like the sword for more damage. Maybe you want to go like Thieves Gloves or like a Titans on like another carry. But the other thing to think about is, who are my other best units that I want to itemize because they're really effective in my comp? In this case, the other best unit to consider is Caitlyn. Caitlyn is a secondary carry that is also really important because even though she's not necessarily an edgelord, she benefits from the 4 8-bit. And the 4 8-bit is a really crucial amount of AD to capitalize upon. And fortunately, we do actually have itemization that can actually capitalize on it, because this sword will help us itemize this Caitlyn. So Xunge basically has to think about, how am I going to itemize my secondary carry as well as make something that provides anti-heal, and maybe something for Viego as well. A lot of times I review profiles and I see people like throw random items on stuff. Like they'll have like, one item on this Mordekaiser that's a defensive item. Like, oh, like Mordekaiser is my tank. He's a sentinel and he's pentakill. So why not just throw like my one tank item onto him? Then I see somebody put like an anti-heal item on like Yone, because they're like, well, he's moving around. Maybe he'll just hold his anti-heal and I want to have 3 damage on it from my Viego. But you have to remember an important concept, that items multiply off each other. So because Viego has 2 items, you definitely want him to have a 3rd item, because that makes him much more likely to be able to get the effect off of what you're looking for. So in this scenario, no matter what, 3rd item for Viego, anti-heal, and try to make something for Caitlyn. And then if he has anything left over, if you really wanted to, you could actually go for like Mordekaiser with a Thieves Gloves. That leaves him some really awkward itemization, so I'm curious what he's going to go for. I'm spending a lot of time on itemization, by the way, because, well, quite frankly, the macro of this game is quite simple. You just want to basically hit Riven 3 as fast as you can. And so he commits to Sunfire Cape on the Viego, and that way he can make an Infinity Edge and that Rage Blade on the Caitlyn. And that Infinity Edge is really powerful because it converts off that bonus AD or the 8-bit. 8-bit gives you a lot of raw attack damage, right? So Caitlyn's not going to just deal a lot more physical damage. Instead of just giving her more physical, you want to multiply that through other ways, through, in this case, the critical strike chance off the Infinity Edge, because the higher the base number, the higher the crit multiplier number will be. And then attack speed to help make her try to actually be a DPS unit. But this is the happy marriage of like how he can get everything that he was looking for, which is 3 jumps in Viego, anti-heal, and try to get a secondary source of damage through his Caitlyn. And now look at his composition is fully online and cooking. And this Riven is kind of unstoppable. The Indomitable Will is activating. And now all of a sudden, what looked like to be like a doom spot has now completely turned around. And also you're kind of understanding like why people really believe in Riven, because she ambushes so many compositions that don't have the DPS to take her down. Riven is much better than Yone at dealing with single target carries like those Aries or whoever ends up locking onto her, because she has that shield and her way to stay into the fight. While Yone can struggle because he kind of has the best offense is the best defense kind of mentality, where he just wants to heal back everything. All right, so now we are booked for top 5 and we're looking to see what we can do even better from here. If we can find a 3rd item for Caitlyn, that'd be great. In this case, red buff would be the only thing considered, or a death blade. He also could take a defensive item if he wanted to. Like, unfortunately, that Warmogs was sniped, but if he, had a defensive item, he starts putting it on things like that Mordekaiser. Has to be really careful about that true damage Ari. That is one thing that you do have to consider, which is you do have resistances is, but true damage is a way to get through all that. So while Riven is usually good against Ahri, you have to be a little bit careful with how you try to position. And you can see he moves on the other side because he doesn't want this Riven onto that Ahri, or vice versa. And his opponent tried to actually directly confront because put the Ahri on the third row to try to get to that Riven. Very, very sneaky. It doesn't matter. That true damage Yasuo and that 6 true damage is just too strong. It's really funny at the very beginning of the game. I actually talked about how Yasuo reroll really wants true damage, and somebody with true damage Yasuo is actually just kind of popping off. The top 4 has been secured. The job's been done. And I think based off the HP alone, we're guaranteed top 2. So it looks like we do lose to that true damage Yasuo 3. I don't really expect us to beat this true damage board. All right, so we reposition and try to confront the 1-star Ahri. This is actually okay because it's not the 6 true damage Ahri, but it's still pretty scary. That being said, it's in 1-star Ahri, so it feels like pretty easy fodder for Riven to chop down. And yeah, that should be top 2. It is. And I think we're going to lose to the 6 true damage, you know, high roll RE2 comp because that's really, really tough for us to beat. But overall, I was really impressed with this composition. And I think that like this shows you like why Riven is such a powerful comp. Okay, what happened here? What? His opponent just conceded? Okay, well, we take those, I guess. So hopefully you see why China really believes the Riven comp is really strong, because you can play it from all different kinds of angles. It's one of the roughest early games I've ever seen that converted into a first for that Riven 3. And most importantly, it shows you how to also try to pull yourself out of a low roll position in the future if you have reroll comps in mind based off of the items that you have. But of course, some things did go right for him where he was able to hit like that Yone and, you know, all in that 3-5. But all things considering, I think that was an excellently navigated spot from Xunge to show you how to turn around one of those spots and play aggressive. Hope you guys enjoyed this video on the tech from China. This has been Frodan, and I'll see you guys next time.